things I always teach my residents is someone comes in and they're bothered by some tiny little line that you really don't see, but you think that they need Botox in their glabella, but you don't address what they came in for, they're not happy. So see what they see. Try and understand where they're coming from. You need to listen to your patient and then tell them what you see and maybe give them a global experience of why you think they should sign on for this kind of regimen for the future, this kind of goal. And also discuss a long-term plan, not just what they're doing for that day. This is skincare that I do in my office. I have a lot of testers, and I find that I show them the creams that I want them to use at home, and if you show them the creams, put it on their hands, make them feel it, make them smell it, you don't get those phone calls, you don't get the returns because they've already seen it, felt it, and they like it. I have an AM/PM sheet that I made that I fill out for every patient. It's like a little prescription. AM, do this step 1, step 2, step 3. They put it on their refrigerator. And I'm telling you, so many people, they come back to me, they bring this little sheet with them. And they say, how should I change this now? It's winter, should I change it? And they really hold on to this as their, it's their Bible. Managing expectations is important. And I also think that you need to manage pain control, bruising, post-procedure expectations. So for pain, we talked about this earlier. I do have Pronox. We sometimes use IM Toradol. I talk about the downtime. I talk about, and don't minimize downtime. This is something that a lot of people try to do. Don't minimize it. Give them the worst case scenario and the best case scenario. So they don't come back a week later and say, but you said it was only 2 days. Well, you should say your erythema should last between 2 to 10 days, or the bruising can last X amount of time depending on your clotting factors. So I think that the more information and discussion you have with your patient about these types of things, the better and happier your patient's going to be. Don't be afraid to touch the patient. I find that a lot of patients come into me and they've been elsewhere and they say to me, they didn't even touch me. They didn't even come near me. And they just feel like there's no connection. You want to connect with your patients. I find that when I do fillers on a patient, I need to actually touch their face, feel their skin, feel the laxity, see what the vectors are. And I think that they appreciate that and they feel like you're really taking the time to care about them as an individual. So I urge you to connect with the patient by either touching the skin where you're going to inject, put your hand on their shoulders so they know that you're there for them. Connect with the patient, mutual interest. Everybody has some interest, so I try to look at my patient and figure out what can I connect with. Is it yoga? Is it boating? Is it scuba diving? Is it motorcycles? Is it that they like to shoot? The first patient that you saw with the mirror, that's her shooting right there. Do they like to travel? Is it just that they like shoes? Whatever it is, connect with your patient, discuss it with them. They feel like they're connecting to you. And there's a lot of studies out there that show that patient retention is better when there's actually a personal interaction between the doctor and the patient, and it's not what you did for them necessarily or the result that they had in the aesthetic practice, but the interaction that they had with the people there. So smile goes a long way.
Consultations are the basis of our practice. I mean, every single person who's a member of your practice starts with a consult. And yet in training, we get almost no experience with that other than watching different people do it. And a lot of times, your mentors are not necessarily people who do great consults. I try and sort of take a deep breath before I open the door to step in to see a new patient and just let the rest of the day disappear for a minute so I'm fresh with them when they walk in. Because it's really all about your relationship with them that determines whether or not they're going to stay as a patient of yours over time. You also have to be very careful what you say to them. I've been fortunate enough to be in practice for a long time, and I have patients all the time who come in and say, I remember 20 years ago when you told me, remember what you told me, doc? When you're talking to patients, it's not, I mean, sometimes there are issues with patients. I mean, we look back and we think, wow, I really read that patient wrong. Sometimes things went wrong because we did something wrong or the patient did something wrong, and sometimes it's just a patient perhaps we shouldn't have treated. So I think it's important to remember when you're talking to patients in a consultation, it's not just a sales pitch. It's not you trying to convince the patient of what they need to have done. It's also your chance to interview them and to be sure that it's somebody you want to keep in your practice. And it's somebody who really will fit with you, and it's not the one that you look at your schedule and think, oh God, it's her, because that's the one that ruins your day. The other thing that's really important is a stool. You want to sit down. All right, patients always say, if you talk to them about doctor visits or if you actually have to see the doctor yourself, nobody spends enough time with me as a patient. So if you sit down, even if you're only sitting for a short time, it gives the illusion of you being there and you're comfortable and you're taking your time and you're not like 1 foot out the door. So it's like they always used to tell you, don't stand there with your hand on the doorknob when you're leaving because it implies you're walking out. They're minor things, but the patient reads that. So park yourself in front of them and have that discussion. And as Amy said, touch them. Warning signs in the consultation, inappropriate behavior. All right, there are definitely patients who are crazy, right? Some of us in the room are crazy. All right, so it's important that you know that people who come in, they have the story, multiple docs have treated them, nobody's ever done filler right. You're going to be the grand poobah who's going to suddenly be the one to make them happy. You're not. You have to remind yourself of that. People who have issues have issues. If the patient won't listen to you and they're just bouncing around all the time with these different thoughts and you can't actually talk about what you want to talk about, that's a patient who's going to be a challenge. And even if you're young in your practice and you're trying to build a practice, you don't want these people. They're going to drive you nuts. They're going to make you unhappy. You're going to lose money taking care of them and refunding them and things like that. And the last one I'm going to show you is you can't always tell the people who are a challenge. So there are some people who come in and you look at them and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to touch them. And there's some who are sweet and demure and wonderful, but if you have time to sit down and talk to them, you'll start picking up signs that these may be problems. And if you can't find that out on your own, your staff will tell you before you walk in the door. So listen to your staff when they tell you, uh-oh, this one's a problem.